Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we dive into the strategies and insights of thought leaders who challenge us to think differently and lead more effectively. What if there was a framework that could transform your learning and development programs from a routine checkbox to a powerful catalyst for organizational success? To answer that question, today I'm joined by Dr. Jim Kirkpatrick, a senior consultant for Kirkpatrick Partners and a visionary behind the new World Kirkpatrick Model. Jim is dedicated to helping learning professionals become strategic business partners and has co-authored many best-selling and groundbreaking books in the learning and development space. In this episode, Jim offers a clear roadmap for success, breaking training into 4 interconnected levels, from participant satisfaction to measurable business outcomes. At each level is built on the previous one, ensuring training programs don't just teach, but transform. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we engage with esteemed thought leaders and explore research-backed strategies and techniques that empower leaders at every level to achieve meaningful results that drive lasting change. How has training and L&D changed or evolved over the past few decades, and what trends do you see shaping its future?
Well, I've seen changes in learning, a lot of changes in learning. People call it, learning on the spot and learning in the workplace and all that. So excellent changes in learning. Also, it's been around for 15 years or so is learner preference, figuring out what kind of learning activities help people learn and making it more selective and more powerful. AI now is helping to streamline learning so that people have more time to talk to each other rather than be gathering and working on all the data. So I see those are some things that have made advances. I think the other side of the coin is I see some things that are not advancing and we really need to advance. And one of them is not talking about learning all the time. And we keep thinking that learning is going to be a magic answer that resonates with line managers and supervisors and higher ups. And for the most part, it doesn't because they think cost center. And then some of them say, I ask them, what's the first department to get cut? They say learning, like it's a foregone conclusion. And yet there lies an opportunity because the word learning isn't enough power for people that are not learning professionals, because we think it's all important because we're in it. But I think there's the opportunity is to add the component of performance, making sure that learning professionals are not just sitting back and testing people and doing smile sheets and teaching and all that, but they actually are spending time in the business to earn credibility as adding value, not just training and training and training.
Well, that's what I love about the Kirkpatrick model too, because I agree with you. The greatest challenge is demonstrating tangible business value of training programs. It's been a challenge for a lot of training professionals to connect training outcomes to organizational performance. And that's always been the challenge. It continues to be the challenge in the industry, and perhaps still is kind of one of the biggest challenges that they're facing today. Why do you feel that training programs often fail to achieve that intended outcome? And how can organizations avoid this pitfall?
Now, you addressed two different things there, and I want to address them both. One is about demonstrating it, the value, and the other you said is about achieving the value. And that's two very different things. I want to start with the achieving part. And a lot of times people are trying to achieve things that are way beyond the level where they can do it, in the military or healthcare, where the learning can achieve value in getting money back from Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff, and mission accomplishment. It really is difficult to achieve mission outcomes from learning in and of itself because it just doesn't have enough power. Now, if you're talking about achieving performance, that it can do. It has the strength to do that, particularly if that learning is also occurring in ships or in hospitals or in clinics or wherever it is. And so the whole issue of achievement is people are over expecting learning to achieve mission value. It just isn't strong enough in and of itself, and you've got to combine it with the performance. Now, how do you demonstrate it? That's another issue that I want everyone to listen to this. This is a pretty easy fix. Rather than trying to demonstrate return on investment from to the CEOs and the generals and the admirals and the high level people, it's just too long a distance. It's just too high. And so you need to kind of break it up into pieces and start trying to focus on not only achieving, but demonstrating value to line managers and supervisors, unit leaders, those kind of people, because you're closer to them. And we call it the Kirkpatrick level 2 is learning, level 3 is behavior. We can cross that bridge and really demonstrate, first of all, achieve value in the workplace and demonstrate it. And guess what? Then those line managers, unit leaders, supervisors, those people become advocates for us. And they see, wow, Charles, you've helped my people do their job better. And what that means is that of course you're the CEO, so it doesn't get any higher than you. But people that are reporting to you can say, we are seeing some great things done by our partnering. And that is how you get it. You need an intermediary to get up to CEOs and the admirals and the generals in order to demonstrate value, rather than trying to just jump too high, too far. Just can't do it.
That's an important distinction to make. So thank you for providing that for us. Let's jump into the Kirkpatrick levels because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And actually, you start with 4, and there'll be a reason why we do this, and we'll kind of unpack that. But level 4 holds the distinction of being the most understood of the 4 levels. And it is the degree to which targeted outcomes occur as a result of the training and the support. Can the training tie to business outcomes and be measured through KPIs that matter to the stakeholders of the company? Provide some more insight on level 4 and what the ultimate goal is, and maybe perhaps even talk about those leading indicators.
Okay. Well, you did a good start there for your last name not being Kirkpatrick, because that really is what it is. And the key there is not just random outcomes. We're looking for any kind of outcomes. We're looking for predetermined targeted outcomes. And I think the best way to do that is to find out, talking to as high a level of people as you can about the performance and the learning, churning together. Ask them what kind of outcomes, listen to this carefully, are credible to you. Not some statistician or not somebody else, but what are the metrics and the measures that are meaningful to you? So we start with that and we work towards that and we look for those things. And that's the key, because a lot of times we're trying to show ROI of some kind that they'll say, that's not what we were looking for. That you didn't even ask us. You just assumed that that's what that we were looking for is fewer errors in the workplace or something like that. Say, no, no. If we were looking higher than that, we were looking for, veterans living longer lives, not just something under that. So it really starts with asking, what are the things that you will need to see, not ultimately just to win the verdict and win your favor, but what are those level 4 medium outcomes on the way up the journey? And again, knowing what those are, tracking for those, and trying to influence those. That really is how you succeed with level 4.
And making sure too that when you get the buy-in from the stakeholders, you've identified those business outcomes that they really want to see the needle move on. You establish leading indicators, which are short-term observations and measurements that suggest that these critical behaviors are on track and create a positive and lasting impact for those desired results.
I think I wrote that a lot of years ago. It sounds awful familiar, but you know what that is it's like a journey where you're going from the Malibu to San Francisco or something, and you type in the GPS in the hotel you're wanting to stay in. Well, that's the ultimate destination, but you don't just stare at that and say, well, we're going to just get there in one leap. We have those median stops along the way, and that's what you're talking about, leading indicators. Those are signs. And if you get off the road a little bit or something's happening up ahead of you, it recalculates and said, oh, you need to turn left here. And that's why we are more concerned about, is it working, whatever these intended outcomes are, rather than just at the end, did it work and what ROI did we get out of it? So that is really the key, the level 4 signs of progress that you're working toward that arise from level 3 performance.
And you give some great examples in the book too about internal leading indicators. They could be quality ratings, errors, KPIs, safety issues like critical incidents. There's external leading indicators as well that's more customer or client focused about new customers coming into the program participation, customer ratings. But like what you mentioned too, is that, first, they keep your initiatives on track by serving as a last line of defense against a possible failure at level 4. So you need to be monitoring these along the way, because you mentioned a great example in the book. A football team doesn't wait till the end of the season to see if they won the Super Bowl. They adjust, they course correct every single game to fix those things that are not on track to make it more likely they're going to win the Super Bowl at the end of the season.
That is exactly right. And I worked at the Indianapolis Colts some years ago, back with a guy named Peyton Manning was the quarterback and stuff. And we used to talk, say, we got to move the chains and we got to make adjustments, not in our playbook, but during the game, because those darn New England Patriots are doing something different than the film said. And if anybody knows Manning, he was very good at looking at what was going on there and making adjustments in the second half in order to win the game. It's the same with us. We need to find out things aren't going as we thought they were. We need to send a team there, to the journey and find out what's going on, and then make adjustments to get back on track.
And as with the evaluation at all levels, evaluating level 4 success is a process. It's not an event. So you have to do it over time to make sure these are identified and tracked and corrected as soon as possible.
Now, one thing I'd like to say about that too is one, I think learning has made much better advancements than has evaluation. And with evaluation, we still are trusting smile sheets or surveys after the training. And we're doing the same. We're sending out 90-day surveys to people to find out how's it going out there. That is one piece of the data and information we need. But a lot of people, that's all they do. And I think a lot of people know that people are not always truthful on surveys. They're telling people what they want to hear. Oh, sure, we're doing it. Oh, absolutely, I'm doing it faithfully. Well, maybe yes, and probably no. So we really need better radar, better intel. And you use the terms, qualitative and quantitative ways of checking. So we want to get a variety of different things and kind of triangulate and coordinate it so we're closer to the truth of what's happening during that climb up that mountain or towards San Francisco or whatever. We need accurate intel, not just one source that is probably not accurate at all.
You're right. And we're going to get more into those training evaluations toward the end of our conversation, because that's so important to gauge and measure the effectiveness of training. Let's move to level 3. And this is the degree to which participants apply what they've learned during the training when they're back on the job. This is truly the missing link in moving from learning to results. And I love how you mention it also in the book, is that organizations tend to want to lead with competencies. I see this all the time. However, it's more effective to lead with critical behaviors and then select those competencies that support them.
And I use the term the tail wagging the dog. When the learning people have determined these are what we believe, or what competency model we bought, or what competency model we built, that will be the ones that people need to learn in order to bring about positive performance. But unfortunately, some of those are years old. And we work a lot in the military, and the battle situation changes so quickly that the behaviors change and the performance needs change. Therefore, that needs to inform the learning people that the competencies, these are out of date. That is no longer what people need to be competent in. Comes up. We've got, it's time of this filming, we've got drones flying over New York and New Jersey, and everyone, some people are freaking out, others are saying not anything to worry about. But, you need to find out what kind of things do we need to do to counter those or identify those, because this is a whole new issue that we do not have competencies for yet. I think some of the military does, but they're not telling us about it. But,
And the other thing that you mentioned, which I think is really telling here, and people should be mindful of, is only identify a few behaviors. With too many behaviors, employees confuse as to what is truly important. And when you look at behaviors, it needs to pass the video test. It needs to be specific, observable, and measurable. If it doesn't pass the video test, you need to redefine it and clarify it further.
Yeah, let me start with a video test because so often I see people have written behaviors and I look at them and I'm saying, I have no idea what I would do. I can't even picture how I would do that. And oftentimes it might be a competency or a skill, or it might be an outcome. Oftentimes they're outcomes. And so it has to be something that I can say, oh, yeah, I know exactly what I need to do in Charles' company in order to properly do that. And also supervisors or peers who are observing that to make sure it's happening need to know exactly what to look for. So they need that same description. So they're saying, okay, someone's watching Jim here. Is he doing it properly? And so without that clarity, it's just chaos, and people never become competent, or they never are performing their job properly. And then you're not going to get the results. And guess who gets blamed? Blamed is training. They weren't trained properly. Sometimes it's just a simple way of making sure those required drivers that I know you're getting to real soon are actually happening, or people are performing their job as they should.
And that's essential. Those required drivers are those processes and systems that reinforce, monitor, encourage, and reward performance of the critical behaviors on the job. And what I think a lot of organizations miss is that organizations that reinforce the knowledge and the skills learned during the training with accountability and support systems can expect as much as 85% of application on the job. Conversely, companies that rely primarily on training alone and nothing to support that, then about 15% of those training programs or initiatives have success rates. So that's a huge difference. It's so essential to have those required drivers if you really want to have that behavior change happen.
And a lot of times those organizations, and there's a lot of big ones, that it's the majority, to be honest with you, they don't even have the good radar to be able to determine if all they're doing is a 90-day survey. They may get 10% response rate, and those 10% are saying, sure, we're doing it. They have the false security that people are actually doing it. But the foe that will defeat human nature every time is actually human nature, because I'm one of the like 88% that unless somebody is behind me giving me a nudge, unless somebody is encouraging me, or I have something that I can look at that's going to help drive me, the training is going to be out of my mind almost as quickly as I get back to a job, well intended. But then I'll go back to what's familiar and comfortable without those drivers, because those are not business drivers, they're behavior drivers, as you described, that will provide the right support and accountability to say, okay, Jim, we're going to help you along the way with this because you're human. And that's really the key to that, all the way from 15 to 85%, which is enormous.
You're right. And these required drivers come in two categories: support and accountability. So, the support, really, some examples are follow up modules, refreshers, reminders, coaching. The accountability category is really around observation, self monitoring, having an action plan. Because a surprising stat that I found was from the book was in one group or one study that you mentioned, 70% of training graduates tried to do something but failed. So for them, they need support tools. 15% didn't even try. They need the accountability methods, correct?
That's right. That's right. And you know what? I used to work with an organization called Balanced Scorecard Collaborative, and back in the 90s, they were the ones that originated scorecards, balanced scorecards, dashboards. And back then, they knew that the reason that most initiatives failed ultimately was a lack of accountability. It wasn't poor training, it wasn't this and that. It was where they set up, supervision or colleague observation and coaching and that kind of stuff, and it went away. They started it right away, and pretty soon it became optional. Pretty soon it didn't happen. And when the accountability was gone, people kind of looked around and said, well, I guess they really don't care. The coaching quit, the mentoring quit, the buddy system quit. Oh, well, I guess I'm going to go back to what's familiar and comfortable. And then they blame training for it. They blame the strategy. And it is really the failure to hold people accountable. And I don't mean looking over them with a stick or anything, but that accountability can be through all kinds of different things: technology, reminders, touch bases, once a week with people that you graduated with, from the training and saying, well, how's it going? What's working and what isn't? That's one of my favorites. And having a leader there to kind of help guide and help shape it. Because the longer you wait, the more likely those behaviors will not happen.
And we do a lot of soft skill training here as well. And if we're teaching communication skills, it might be counterproductive to measure progress right after the training because people need time to practice the new behaviors to get
Right.
comfortable. However, reinforcement and encouragement should start immediately after training so that you have those supporting drivers that are activated right away by keeping reminding or having a reminder for those graduates of the importance of performing these new behaviors.
Yep, that's right. And a lot of people still believe that it's the job of the supervisor. The supervisor needs to be doing the one-on-ones and all that. But we are finding over the last 10 years anyway, that the group works better, the work group, and the supervisor's nearby, leaders nearby, but people tend to hold each other more accountable where it can be kind of awkward with a boss and subordinate kind of thing, and they hold each other accountable, and it you can get a whole lot more done than relying on one supervisor. If you have 10 people that went through a class last year and 8 of them are doing their job as leaders or whatever work it is, have them be the mentors to the new graduates in that company. And it just works so much better and it's so much more powerful.
Well, and with IMS, we really try to get that application of on the job learning done. That's our goal. We try to tie it to business outcomes when we can. But in order for that behavior change to happen, for that application to happen, the learning has to be done. And that's really what level two is all about, is the degree to which participants acquire the intended knowledge, skills, and have the attitude, confidence, and commitment based on their participation in the training. Talk to me a little bit about, there's the part that says knowledge, I know it, which is essential. The skill part is I can do it now. But even more important is the attitude part of this. I believe this is going to be worthwhile for me to do now, and I'm confident and committed to doing it.
Well, and that's so often how people evaluate level two is through a knowledge test. I mean, I could study for 6 months for a air traffic controller, and I could pass the test, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to do it. So I really like that you're talking about the skills. Do it. Can you demonstrate the skills in a controlled environment? And if not, well, you got to keep working on that. But I really love the thing about attitude because the human factor is becoming larger and larger in all of this, where people believe that somebody cares about my progress. They said, oh, there would be somebody waiting for me back at the job when I get back there. And guess what? There's someone that says, welcome back. And that does everything to build trust and build attitude. And people can see their progress and people can encourage them and say, I saw you do that. I mean, that's a trick I do all the time. When I see somebody do something, I'll say, wait a minute, everybody. Did you just hear that? Did you just see that? And they'll all say, what? I said, say it again. And they'll say it or they'll do it because you want to encourage when you see the positive rather than just be watching to catch somebody not doing it, which is more of a discourager than an encourager.
And that confidence and commitment to perform the new skills on the job are really built through a good training program that provides participants ample opportunities to practice, ask questions, and discuss expectations. I see this a lot in other training programs where it's just so much content. They're overloaded on content. They don't get abilities or time and space to practice and to ask those questions to connect it in a deeper level to what they need it for.
And you do that with your programs.
We try to definitely do that. I mean, our programs, I always recommend for our educators that no more than 50% of the total time in the program is spent on content. The rest is practice, interaction, reflection, having them ask those questions because they need to be able to use this. And if they don't feel comfortable with this skill yet, they're not going to use it. They're going to default back to their own default neural pathways when they get back to the job, and nothing's going to change.
I'm glad you brought up the default and the default neural pathways. That is how we are, and it's familiar and comfortable. And I know that I've talked to some of the people, some of the people that report to you, and they say the same thing that there's a much emphasis on what happens next rather than you pass the test or you sat through a whole bunch of content. And I didn't know it was 50-50. I'm really thrilled, Charles, to hear that that's what you guys go for.
Well, in some cases, what we really try to employ, which is getting back to the work of Britt Andreatta, Paul Zak, and it's the 20-20-20 model where it's 20% of the time, or maybe for the hour, 20 minutes of content, 20 minutes of practical application, and then 20 minutes of a silent reflection, ask questions, and a break. Because your brain can only process so much at each given hour, and then cognitive overload sets in, and nothing gets in as a result. And it's just kind of going in one ear and out the other.
And that whole thing is somebody goes for an hour and a half, and at the end, they're looking at their watch, it's break time, and they say, any questions? Of course, they're looking at the watch, and of course, no one's going to ask any questions because they know it's break time. And any questions they had in the first 15 minutes or 20 are long gone and can't be dealt with. So, but it's so prevalent. It's just a shame, really.
Well, in level one, getting now to level one, this is kind of where a lot of training focuses, and this is on customer satisfaction measurements. The degree to which the training is relevant, is engaging to the individuals. It's the smiles, right? The smile sheets that, did I enjoy it? And I think that's important to note because they have to have the right mindset going into a learning experience. They have to see the benefit. You have to connect it with the with and what's in it for them. So they're in a more receptive mood, right, to have that learning take place and assimilate or absorb the information.
One of my favorite things that I do when I can is, and I can anytime I want to, so I do it all the time, is I make sure to a training I'm giving, I invite someone who was a graduate a year ago. And somebody that I hand select because I know what they've done, and I have them come in, and you know what they do? They say, everybody, I was sitting right there a year ago, and let me tell you what kind of support I was provided, what I did to initiate success, and here are some of the outcomes that me and my colleagues actually accomplished. And that is so rarely done, but I always invite a graduate to give a testimony so people can see, what will this look like when I get done? And I do that work with NASA a lot. And what they do, and Charles, you might get a kick out of this, is in their syllabus, their core syllabus, they write down, these are the learning objectives. And then they also list, these are the activities that we're going to be participating. Here are the behaviors that we're expecting you to do when you get back. This is engineering group. When you get back to job, here is the help that we are going to be providing. And here are the outcomes that you'll be contributing to. So they just bake that right in, right from the start, and say, this is not over when you leave this class at the end of the week. This is the beginning, and this is a sequence. And then I love to pair that with bringing someone in and says, here's what's happened the last year since our training. And it just works like magic.
I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.